Hi, I'm Rick, and I've been playing, buying, and working on guitars for 40 years. I worked at Gibson Guitars from 1996 to 2000. Still love those people and still love their products. Today we're going to be talking about how Gibson and Fender used the automotive industry in the 50s and 60s to make modern and futuristic designs. The American car companies were influencing and dominating the world. The American guitar companies were doing the same. With space-age names like the Stratocaster and the Futura, Fender and Gibson were aiming sky high. I still love American guitars and amps. They are still my first choice. Don't get me wrong, our friends overseas, they're great luthiers and engineers, but I believe they will agree that the United States makes their favorite guitars too. Even to this day, some of the best guitars and amps in the world are made right here in America. Hope you enjoy this episode. This is a Gibson Firebird 1. And what a Firebird 1 is, the lower price student model of the Firebird 5. Firebird 5 was a very unusual guitar. It was the first of its kind for Gibson. For many years, they were making Les Pauls, SGs, the ES series, which stands for Electric Spanish, like the 175s, ES335, ES330, ES250, etc. Electric Spanish just means they were hollow or semi-hollow with F-holes. F-holes on stringed instruments, guitars, violins, mandolins. They look like a lowercase cursive F, maybe like the forte symbol in music. Gibson was having a hard time keeping up with Fender in the 50s and early 60s because Fender was wildly popular. They were just such a modern guitar. You know, Gibson was kind of looked at as the old violin, mandolin maker kind of company. For the young kids of the day, wanted to surf music and fast cars. This was designed in '63 by an automobile maker named Ray Dietrich. Fender and Gibson both borrowed from the automotive industry. A lot of the paint configurations were the same as cars of the day. The old guitars you'll see are red and white or blue and white. They look a lot like 57 Chevys and old Fords and things like that, the same color palette. Where Gibson always used to try to stain and paint wood and did a beautiful job, still do. Fender was more hip in the 50s. They were going with solid colors, metallic colors, and they made their guitars look more like metal and plastic, where Gibson's, looked like wood. So Gibson hired famed automotive maker Ray Dietrich, who had worked for all these companies and designed beautiful luxury cars of the day. They let him design this. This is called the Firebird 1, and it's completely different than any Gibson built at the time, and really since. There's nothing like one of these. Now, this was not made by a guitar player. This was made by a designer. So some of that's cool and some of that's not cool, but obviously it's a classic. What's really cool about it is very sleek. This is all one piece. This is called a neck through body. It means the neck and this piece are one, and it goes all the way through the guitar. Gibson has never done that before. Fender wasn't doing that either. So this is really one piece of wood right here, all the way up, all the way down. These two pieces are glued to this plank. And this is why it's called the the Firebird. Kind of had the bird wings, right? This was the model that was the cheaper model. The more expensive ones, like the Firebird 5, had the 2 pickups and different things, and the Firebird 7 with 3 pickups and tremolo and gold and inlays. This was just a stripped down version. The body is exactly the same as the Firebird 5 or 7. The numbers 2 and 4 were reserved for the Thunderbird base companions. They were available in reverse and non-reverse as well. But this Firebird 1, I always wanted one of these because Eric Clapton played one of these. Paul Stanley on the cover of Kiss Alive had one of these, and they're kind of a curious shape. So I got to play one at Gibson, and I was like, wow, it just sounded amazing because it sounded totally different than any other Gibson or Fender. These pickups are different. This is not a mini humbucker. Even though it looks like a mini humbucker, the pickup is made completely different, and they have a very mid-rangey high output, and I really like it. Now, the one drawback about Firebirds that I was talking about, for me, they're so long that I always feel like the 12th fret should be about right here or here, and it's right here, so it's a little different for a player, but man, you know, nothing does what a Firebird does. And this little Firebird 1 is a really cool little guitar. Let me grab a pick, and we'll go through some tones here, yeah. So it's a very bright but powerful sound. And it's got kind of a chimey sound too, which I like. Similar to the P90s, how it has a bright, chimey sound, but it's definitely got more output and more sustain. Part of that sustain, you know, obviously being the, you know, the neck through design. So. Neck through designs had been around since the late 30s. Neck through is hard to mass produce, unlike bolt-on necks, which Fender excelled at. Obviously, the most famous Firebird player would be Johnny Winter. He played a Firebird. Many guitar players, you know, Brian Jones from Rolling Stones, many played Firebirds. Not many played Firebirds exclusively. Johnny Winter would be in that category. He's known for playing a Firebird. This guy right here is the Firebird 5. That's the classic Firebird. Now, it's got a more sophisticated paint job. It's more difficult to do a sunburst like that. Has a burst all the way around. What a burst is, for those that don't know, it's like, so the guitar is painted one color, and then you have a person who does this by hand with the spray gun, and they spray black around the body, and that's what makes it, it's what it's called a burst. And then of course here, since this is transparent, you can see that this is mahogany, and this extra little stripe here is walnut, or at least that's how they used to do it. And sometimes they would go all the way up with the walnut, all the way up, and then mahogany for extra strength or whatnot, but you can feel it. I got a deal on this a few years ago. This is the Firebird 5, but the reason why I got a deal on it was because they were trying something different. It has these Steinberger keys on them, but I wanted a Firebird so bad, and I happen to have some 30-year-old Firebird pickups that I put in here, the ones that I love. So I immediately bought this guitar, took those pickups out that were in here because I don't think they were the ones that I liked that they were putting out in the 90s. They didn't do it for me like the other ones did. So luckily I had those and put those in. But anyway, this is what a classic Firebird looks like. Designed by automaker Ray Dietrich. Very fun guitar. And again, you know, Gibson using the 6 pegs on one side, kind of like Fender. The original Firebird 5s come with banjo tuning keys. They put tuning keys from a banjo on there. Very odd. Again, a very odd guitar, but pretty cool. Anyway, let's see what this guy's gonna do. It needs attention. I used to work on guitars every day and then work on my own and work on other people's. These have a nice ratio, these tuners. And what the ratio means is every time you barely turn the knob and the string goes up or down, that's good. That's what you want. You don't want a whole lot of play in your tuning keys. And these don't have any play in them, that's for sure. This is a Gibson Explorer. This is a 92 Gibson Explorer. We can't really talk about the Firebird unless we talk about the Explorer. Now, most people, when they see this guitar and they look at this guitar, they think 1980s or 70s, but we would all be wrong. This design started in the 50s. Designed in 1957 by Gibson's team, led by Ted McCarty, their president. McCarty was one of the most innovative leaders in Gibson's history. All of this was prior to Beatlemania and the guitar craze that was sweeping America. 1958 was when this guitar actually hit the market. As we stated earlier, Gibson was being crushed or humiliated a little bit by Fender. Fender was the modern guitar. That's what the young people wanted to play, and Gibson, again, was looked as the old violin maker. So they come up with a radical design. They decided they were going to do something completely different. A lot of people associate this with either classic rock or heavy metal or hair metal or death metal. This guitar has been around, and a lot of the greats have played these, and a lot of the greats have these in their collection, the real ones from '58. This is a 92. So when you think 80s metal, and even The Edge from U2 played this guitar. They started in 1975 in Nashville, and in 1976 they reissued the Explorer. Hadn't been on the market since 1958. This guitar was actually a commercial failure. This, the Flying V, and the Modern. Those bodies are a part of 50s space age futuristic shapes. So that's why it's got this shape. We always called this the hockey stick headstock, but it's actually called the scimitar headstock, which is a small curved sword. Really, these odd shapes like this and the Firebird were from the fins of a Cadillac or a Chrysler. So if you think cars in the 50s and you see these back fins right here, that's really where it come from. So it has an elongated treble side, an elongated bass side. It's a crazy shape. But the guitar took off later. Complete failure in the 50s. A lot of great collectors sought after these 1958 models because I think there were only 22 in production, and those guitars were worth millions of dollars. Even in the 60s and 70s, they were very sought after because they're so rare. These guitars have been copied and frauded and copied legally and illegally by a lot of companies, this shape. But this is what Gibson come up with as an answer to the Fender problem. The Gibson Explorer, the Gibson Flying V, were really bought by dealers just to hang in the window. They bought these just as eye candy, just because they were so weird and so radical. Now they're kind of a staple of classic rock, and they're kind of part of American, zeitgeist or what have you. But really, the Firebird started with this model. As you can see, the Firebird is much more subtle shape than this. So here's what it sounds like clean, with a little bit of delay on it. So I bought this guitar and about 25, almost 30 years ago. And from a friend, Marcus, the guitar had a broken headstock. It was completely broken off. And once the headstock is completely broken off, it's beyond repair. So I took it into work and began disassembling the whole thing. So this started out as a black Explorer '76 reissue, and this one is a '92. And what had to happen was we had to remove the neck. And how you remove the neck on a Gibson isn't like a Fender. Gibson's necks are glued in, and there's a dovetail joint. That's why there's no bolt or anything. You can't really see it that well, but anyway, they're glued in, and that's why they have such incredible sustain, and they feel so great. And that's why they're more expensive and they're harder to make. Gibsons are harder to fraud than a Fender, because sometimes it's pretty easy to just take the neck off, put another neck on, and there you go. Which was the new way to make guitars, bolt-on necks with Fenders. And Fender got it down. Gibson did it the old way, and the craftsmanship for these glued-on necks are amazing. Now this took much more skill than I had. I did end up removing this neck. Putting it back together, I let somebody else, Tony Nagy, Todd Money, take care of that. They're much better at that. I put several coats of lacquer on it, and the guitar is all mahogany. The body's mahogany and the neck's mahogany. And this was a custom shop version. The only thing left of this guitar that I got is the body itself, and we changed everything. I decided I wanted to make it a different color, color that Gibson didn't run or I'd never seen in production. So I had so many great people there at New Stuff. So Tony picked out this neck, and he picked out this fretboard for me, and did a wonderful job. And he put it on there. This thing plays like a dream. Tony also made by hand. I wanted a tortoiseshell pick guard. So this is tortoiseshell. It looks black on camera, but if you look in the light, you can see little brown plastic swirls and stuff, and it kind of looks like tortoiseshell. The original Explorer come with PAF pickups. They were brand new. Patent applied for is what PAF stands for, because again, Gibson and Fender were getting chippy with the lawsuits. So patent applied for pickups, PAFs were brand new, and those were the humbuckers that come out, state of the art, that went in these guitars. So when they reissued the '76 Explorer in the '90s, they were putting ceramic 496 and 500 Ts in these, which I've heard people play them and make them sound great. I can't make a good sound out of them. So I elected to put in a 490R and a 498T. Basically what pickups are the microphones that pick up the strings. So a 498T and a 490 are different than the PAFs. The PAFs were both identical pickups, and Gibson had had success with those, are great pickups even to this day. JT Ribeloff, research and development at Gibson at the time, knew that when you put two identical pickups in the same guitar, and especially in a Gibson, they're going to have different outputs just by simply where they're going to be located at. Just by having a pickup in the neck position makes the guitar louder, as opposed to taking the same pickup and putting it back here. It resonates more right here than it does here, but here's where you get all the good trebly sounds. So JT designed the 498T to be a little bit hotter, and they're spaced out. The poles are spaced out ever so slightly more, which pick up the strings better. I didn't even know this at the time. I thought these strings were just symmetrical all the way up and down. They're not. Strings actually spread out by the time they get to here, slightly. So he was smart enough to spread these out ever so slightly so they would match up with the pole pieces and pick up better. And I've always loved those pickups. I'm not sure if they still make them. Gibson's always doing great innovations with pickups and stuff, but 490 and 498, I've got those loaded in most every guitar I've got. If they didn't come with it, I put them in there. I love those pickups. They still sound great. Yeah, these guitars are definitely recognizable. Of course, Rick Nielsen from Cheap Trick. He's always been the big Explorer guy, the big vintage ones. I think he owns 3 original out of the 22 that were made, and he has 500 or 600 guitars. He's a very knowledgeable guitarist. His father collected or sold vintage guitars, so that knowledge was passed down to him at exactly the right time. So this is be a good guitar to what you call a high gain monster. So stomp boxes. These are called pedals and they're called stomp boxes. For obvious reasons, you can stomp on it and that's what turns them on or off. That's why they're called stomp boxes. Back before there was channel switching amps, I remember my first channel switching amp that I had, I didn't get till I was probably 20. Was an amazing day because it's like an amp had two channels, one for clean and then one for distortion built right in the amp. Well, before then, amps were only one channel, and if you wanted distortion out of an amp, you either had to turn it all the way up and make it literally distort, or have a pedal or stomp box. So Hendrix, a lot of people think, oh man, he was acid rock heavy and all that and all this psychedelic. He was, but he played beautiful stuff clean. And sometimes, like a lot of guitar players that played with fuzz or distortion, is they would, instead of turning the pedal completely off, that way it's not wide open all the time, because he may be at a point on the stage where he can't run back to the pedal and all that, or that would just kind of make him isolated. So, you know, he would simply just, you know, when you roll, turn the volume of the pickup down or the guitar down, it cleans up. Even though we still have the fuzz box on, which you can hear it because it's noisy, and I got the delay too. It can have an interesting little clean sound. And then we've heard a lot of licks on the records where a guitar player might do that with his amp or his guitar, where he turns the guitar up. When you turn the guitar up, the volume doesn't necessarily go up, the input does, right? So the gain, or the gain. So before channel switching, this is how we had to make stuff clean. So this is a 2016 non-reverse Firebird in copper, limited edition. This one doesn't have the banjo keys or anything like that, but this is yet a Firebird. This guitar's shape come out in '65, and they're worth a freaking fortune now. Of course, all Firebirds are. They're all expensive. This one has two humbuckers. Doesn't have like the Mini or the Firebird kind of pickups. I think they may be a pair of 490s. So what happens when you tune a guitar that hasn't been tuned up in a long time? It's harder to tune them. The reason why that is because the strings are stretching. When you tighten up one, it pulls the neck a little bit closer, then it makes the other ones a little flatter, or vice versa. So the neck's always moving. So the Firebirds were available in regular or non-reverse. Non-reverse, I don't even know what that means. However, these guitars look very similar if you flip them over. Their bodies are very similar, but not quite. Two different Firebirds based on Fender and Gibson getting chippy with each other. So as you can see, the Firebird 5 looks similar when you flip it around. The bodies are not completely the same. This is a non-reverse. This is a forward reverse. No, this is a reverse. Anyway, this is a non-reverse. This is a Firebird 5. This headstock is non-reversed. This headstock is reversed. They tried something different. This one is not neck through. This one is. Fender felt that Gibson was infringing on their copyright by doing the 6 tuning keys to the side. They had already cornered the rock market, and Gibson had cornered the jazz market, so Fender come out with a Jazz Master. It kind of looks something like this in a way. This come out first. They later decided to take the same 5 ingredients and make a new dish out of it, I think. This guitar is actually kind of ugly, which I kind of like it. I like it because of that, so. It was said they wanted to name the Firebird the Phoenix after that bird, but Gibson thought our friends in Arizona might get confused. For a deeper dive on Firebirds, Explorers, or any guitars, to check out 5 Watt World from Keith Williams. Some also say the Explorer was shaped after a bow tie, or maybe something from the Jetsons. I don't own the collectible versions of either Gibsons or Fenders. I bought all these guitars to play at gigs, and that's why they're called Workhorse guitars. Thanks so much for joining us. Hope you'll tune in again. Thanks so much for watching Workhorse Guitars. I'm Rick. We'll see you next time. Now, more serious. Thanks so much for watching Workhorse Guitars. I'm Rick. We'll see you next time. A little more threatening.